it was like someone had overturned a filing cabinet and then scanned it in. And it was just completely out of order. And I mean, imagine having to go through 4,000 or 5,000 pages of mostly very boring bureaucratic information.
I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. This presentation is brought to you in part by the Society of Professional Journalists Foundation. The SPJ Foundation supports NEFAC's efforts to bring journalists into communities and to speak with readers, viewers, and listeners about the work they do and the very important role a free press plays in our democracy. Many thanks to the SPJ Foundation for its support. Also, a quick reminder, December 14th, 7 p.m., NEFAC will be offering a very special exclusive program with CNN's John King, master of the magic wall. Many of us have spent Election Day and the days that followed listening to John, a Boston native, discuss the presidential election. So please join us for that conversation. You can find out more information and register at nefac.org. I'm here today with Evan Allen, a reporter at the Boston Globe. Evan, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Evan and her colleagues at the Globe have put together what I believe is a very important and useful resource for those looking for more transparency within police departments, specifically in this case, the Boston Police Department. It's a database that shows allegations of misconduct and records supporting those allegations and provides it in a very easily accessible and useful way. As many of us know, these types of records can be very difficult to obtain in communities throughout New England. And Evan and her colleagues did a fantastic job of putting together this database that can be used by everyone. It's available at the Boston Globe's website, bostonglobe.com. Evan, could you share with us the backstory behind this database, how you identified a need for this particular project and how you went about getting the records that support all of the information that's presented within this database?
Sure. So we actually didn't originally set out to do a database or a project. We originally set out to do what we thought would be a fairly straightforward story about the Boston Police Internal Affairs System. But as we started reporting, we realized that there was actually no way to do a straightforward story about the Internal Affairs Department at the Boston Police Department. So we were hearing from people, sort of a variety from officers and from different organizations, a variety of complaints that the IA department was sort of a black box. Complaints went in and they took years to come out, and the reasoning behind who was punished and who was not, what was sustained and what was not, was sort of inscrutable. And we were also hearing complaints that the discipline was uneven racially and across genders. But we didn't have any good way to investigate whether this was true because we had no data. What we had were a few high profile examples that had made the news, but comparing one individual example to another individual example is very difficult because the Boston Police Department does not have like a matrix for discipline. They don't have, if you do A, then B happens. It's called progressive discipline and it's meant to be flexible. And what that means is that each individual officer is handled sort of case by case. So when you try to compare one case to another, you can always find a reason why this guy deserves a light punishment and this guy deserves a heavy punishment. It's only when you look at the cases sort of in aggregate that you can see trends and you can see how different types of cases are being handled and how different types of officers are being handled. But we didn't have any data at all. So we started by requesting personnel orders, which are internal documents that the Boston Police Department sends out pretty regularly. There's probably between 300 and 500 a year. And they catalog a lot of different things within the department. It's every promotion, every retirement, every hiring, but it's also all or a lot of the discipline. And so we thought we would make a database with that. And we actually we got 10 years of those personnel orders, and that was somewhere in the vicinity of 4,000 or 5,000 pages of individual orders that were not in order, that were not complete. So before we could even start going through them, we had to go by hand and determine what was missing. and then make a new set of requests. And so that process alone took us probably 6 weeks, 2 months, something like that. It was very labor intensive. And we got to the end of it and realized that we still didn't have a complete database because personnel orders only show completed discipline. They don't show who is being accused of what, which is really important, right? We wanted to know more about what officers get accused of things and then not punished for them. So we did manage to get from the police department a log of their internal discipline with the cases, when the case came in, what the allegations were, and the outcome. But that data was very messy. There were lots of repetitions, there were lots of omissions, there were lots of things redacted. So we spent more weeks cleaning that up. And we merged those two data sets. My colleague Andrew Ryan did a ton of work on this. And so we merged those two data sets, and we still didn't have a complete database. We needed information on who these officers were. We wanted race and gender information. So we took 3 different city payrolls from 2009, 2016, and 2020. And we integrated that information, which gives you just like gender and race and that stuff. But we also wanted more information about lots of the individual cases themselves, which sent us on a weeks-long journey of just going through, many district court cases, superior court, federal court, civil court, probate records. We were going just courthouse to courthouse all over Massachusetts for a long time, trying to fill in some of the gaps where we couldn't understand what had happened to cause, for example, harsh discipline. And then we also pulled a lot of civil service and arbitration documents, which helped explain civil service and arbitration proceedings follow serious discipline, so terminations or lengthy suspensions, and they can often overturn department decisions to punish officers, but they give a lot of context on how the internal affairs process works. Anyway, so we spent a long time gathering a lot of records and putting them all together and cleaning them up and making them accessible and correct. We had to do a lot of checking with the police department and just between all the documents. But so the whole process, we started sometime in, I don't know, June or July, something like that. And we just got it online last month. So it was a huge amount of work.
Well, congratulations for doing it.
Thank
really
you.
well done. It's a great project. It's particularly in Massachusetts, where we have a public records law that ranks I don't know, mid-level, maybe toward the bottom as far as other public record laws in the country. How forthcoming was the police department, Boston Police Department, in giving you this information and providing you the records that you needed, albeit messy records and messy data, but how forthcoming was the department in giving you the information you needed to make this database possible?
It was hard to get the information, largely because it came very, very slowly in sort of dribs and drabs. When I say that the personnel orders were difficult to sort through, it was like someone had overturned a filing cabinet and then scanned it in. And it was just completely out of order. And I mean, imagine having to go through 4,000 or 5,000 pages of mostly very boring bureaucratic information about like so-and-so is moving from C11 to B2. And just looking at the personnel order number and trying to log which ones you have and which ones you don't in kind of no order. I mean, you can't even listen to music while you're doing it because any distraction will destroy your ability to focus. And so there was the sort of messiness in the way the records came in, and they were slow. We were waiting weeks and weeks for lots of different requests. We're lucky to be given the time to do this. I think that we have some requests still pending from July that we don't yet have. But we have certain like full IA records that we attached in there, and those would take weeks to come in. And the IA log that we got that does categorize the the case when it comes in, the case number, and how that outcome was fairly redacted. Like there was a lot of things redacted from it, and it took several go rounds with the police to get all of the categories of information that we wanted. We based our request for that log on several different ones that were sort of floating around. There was one made by a city councilor. There was one that we looked at that was made by a lawyer. But what we sort of discovered in trying to make requests was that they would be filled very literally. So if you weren't asking for every specific column that you wanted, it would omit information that you wouldn't even realize you needed and was missing. So for example, the records that the city council had obtained appeared to be complete. However, they were missing a whole bunch of types of cases because they hadn't been specific enough in what types of cases they wanted. So it took a lot of thought and organization and back and forth and double and triple and quadruple checking to make sure that we were actually getting everything that we were asking for. And it was really a very confusing process too.
Is this a process now that you're going to continue? Will this database be updated moving forward, or what is the future of this database hold?
Yeah, we actually have pretty high hopes for the database. We've got a lot of information just upstairs in my office that we need to scan in. We're planning to do a whole bunch of different things. We're going to keep adding documents. So those include IA case files that we get. We have a whole ton of complaints from civil suits. We have information about people's pensions. We're going to include information about people's salaries. We have a whole lot of police reports from different incidents that officers were involved in and charged in. We'll include links to coverage. We'd like to make it sortable. Right now, it's sortable in a variety of ways, like by officer, by case type. But we would like to make it sortable by offense type, for example, so that somebody can say, well, I want to know about use of force of the Boston police, and then they could search for that particular allegation. So what we'd like to do is, we're getting all of these records and we want to share them widely. What goes on in terms of police misconduct in the Boston Police Department is often just invisible to the public. And even if a citizen files a complaint, they often don't hear anything more for years. So we just want to make that whole process visible.
Now, Evan, it may seem very obvious to you and I, NEFAC has been raising the banner for more transparency, particularly within law enforcement agencies for years. And you work within a newsroom, you're part of the watchdog media, your job is to hold government accountable. But for citizens that don't have our background, can you explain why this database is so important? Why are these records and this type of transparency within police departments so important to the public? Why should the everyday average citizen who isn't working in a newsroom or doesn't come from a legal background, why should they care?
I think people can feel very powerless in the face of an institution like the police department. They feel like they have no recourse. They don't understand really how it works. They don't think people will believe them when they say something negative about the police. And often they're right. So, this database is a way to sort of shine some sunlight on that and make it less of a sort of faceless institution and more of an understandable system that people don't feel so cowed by.
That's great. And Evan, before we wrap up here, do you have any suggestions for other journalists outside of the globe that are working in communities, perhaps have smaller police departments, but just as secretive, just as much of a need for transparency? Do you have any suggestions or tips for them on how they can get access to these types of records and provide that sunlight like you and your colleagues do?
Yeah, so a couple of things that were really useful for us. Before we started requesting records from the department itself, we were requesting records from all sorts of private citizens. A lot of attorneys helped us out. A lot of organizations helped us out. people that think about these issues on a sort of day-to-day basis. They helped us not only with how to think about what we needed and how to write our requests, but they also gave us examples. It was, we got one person turned over just all of these IA files that they had, which was fantastic because then we knew what kinds of documents are included in an IA case and we can ask for them specifically. So the more information you have going into a records request for something that you know will be contentious, the more ability you have to get it. And there was a lot of incredibly repetitive and largely fruitless work that went into this database that was like mind-numbingly boring. Like we had a list of probably like 50 or so officers that we were particularly interested in. And we were just like, we were scanning them in every court that we could think of, which is wildly tedious because you have to, if they have a hyphenated name, you have to scan them like 3 different times but you have to put their name in through like 40 different places. I mean, if you're looking in all the district courts in Boston, federal court, superior court, you're looking in probate court, you're looking in the courts in and around the places where they live. It takes a lot of time and most of it is going to come back with nothing. But in a few different cases, in very unlikely places, we found these sort of troves of information. And, that type of work, I would say that like for every 200 useless inquiries, we had 1 useful inquiry and it took a long time. But that is sort of what some of the most important things are some of the most buried things. So doing work that feels like it's really pointless almost because you're almost never going to find anything. Some of that is the most important stuff. I mean, we found one of our sort of main cases by looking in civil court in a county outside of Suffolk, which is not really where police officers get sued in the first place. And it was out of time with all the records that we had. So, we pulled RNV records, which were wildly helpful. So even things that seem tangentially related can actually wind up being like the key that you need that you don't know that you need.
Thank you. That's great guidance and great encouragement to all local journalists. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the work that you do. And congrats again on making this database and providing it online for everyone's use. Great job.
Thank you very much.